So he returns to India in 1908, and this is one of the most toughest period of Iqbal's life. In what sense? Well, there are two things that Islam gives you almost complete freedom in: your career and your choice in marriage. I say almost. Right? These are the two things where we sometimes find we're most bound by society. A son can do whatever he likes, a daughter can do whatever he likes, but when it comes time to marriage, sometimes their choice is taken away from them. Time and the person that they want to marry. Similarly in terms of career. You know, how many mothers, how many fathers, they say, no, do whatever, but you got to do this to make us proud of you. Iqbal too underwent the same thing. He was married at a very young age to a lady called Kareem Bibi, and there was absolutely no compatibility. But he had married purely to please his father. That marriage did not turn out to be a very happy one. Worse, now he had to be a lawyer, and he was not a lawyer. But he felt he needed to be a lawyer to have an income coming in so he can pay back his elder brother, Ata Muhammad, who had afforded his study years in Europe. So you have Iqbal that was going through very tough times. In fact, one colleague even said to him that you should consider psychiatric help, because he was very depressed and he did not feel that he wanted to do anything. This was a time, and again, as I said, even nationalism, you know, an ideology that he adhered to, he had become disillusioned with it. So you had, for example, many stages of Iqbal. You have from Hindu-Muslim unity in his initial days to pan-Islamism, and then he left pan-Islamism as well. Pan-Islamism, an idea that all Muslims, all geographically, you know, there should be one big state. Right? And then he moved on to another idea, which is called Muslim empowerment. Muslims should be empowered. Now, what Iqbal came through in these bleak years, these years of psychological turmoil, was this idea of khudi. You probably have heard about this. And a lot of people don't understand or can't appreciate what this idea of khudi really is. Khudi ko kar buland itna ke har takbir se pehle bande se ye puche bata teri raza kya hai. What Iqbal basically said was that the problem of the Muslim is not in his numbers, obviously. There were enough Muslims in India that if they spat at the British, they could have drowned them. The problem of the Muslim is not that they don't have modern technology. Because remember, Baale Baza, Rasue, Sultan Bolt. Baale Zaha, Rab Goristan Bolt. If you give wings to a falcon, he goes straight to the king's palace. If you give wings to a crow or a vulture, it goes to the garbage dump. So it means it wasn't really the technology or the aspect of, the so-called mechanization. Something was wrong with the philosophy of the Muslim. It was a philosophy of defeat, and that needed to change. He said there was a psychology of defeat that the Muslim was suffering from. The self-image of the Muslim, the collective self-image of a vanquished nation, not of a victor nation. That needs to change. It is the philosophy. And he believed that if today Muslims were to change their philosophy, if Muslims were to change their thinking pattern, their value system, today they can do the same miracles that were done by prophets in the time before. Aaj bhi ho jo Ibrahim ka iman paida aag kar sakti hai andaze Gulistan. So you have this idea of self-fortification. Strengthen your inner self. Don't be a wujudi. Be a shuhudi. What do I mean by that? In the time of Iqbal, they believed that the idea of a believer, ideal believer, is that he must become fana, he must become annihilated in the essence of God, lose his self. And centuries of that belief weakened the Muslim initiative, activeness, proactiveness. So Iqbal came up and said, no, retain your identity. Become close to Allah, but retain yourself. If you look at Mi'raj is probably the closest Rasulullah became to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a spiritual level. Right? Mi'raj. When we say as-salatu Mi'raj al-mu'min, Salah sila comes from connection, right? When you're doing your prayer, you're connecting to Allah. Your connection of a collection of a Muslim to Allah is what? It's his mi'raj. It's his height. That's when he's closest to Allah. When Rasulullah was closest to Allah, did he lose himself in the essence of Allah? No, he didn't. What was he doing? He was negotiating the frequency of the prayers. If you remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had first ordained 50 prayers. Rasulullah went and said, no, lessen it for my nation. He kept his essence, he kept his individuality, he did not lose his ego. So Iqbal was for retaining your identity and then climbing the spiritual ladder. So recognize yourself, groom yourself, empower your psychology, your mind. Change your philosophy of defeat to philosophy of victory. Another aspect of Iqbal's philosophy was becoming action-oriented. The world is a canvas and you are the painter. The world is a battleground, whether you like it or not, and you are thrown in it as a gladiator. Now you can choose not to fight, or you can struggle in the arena, in the battlefield of life, and come out a victor. But if you struggle, then Allah's help is with you. This is the cheat. This is basically a synopsis of Iqbal's views. In 1920s, there were a lot of Muslims that believed that they need to revive the Khilafah. Which Khilafah are we talking about? The Ottoman Caliphate. Right? The Ottomans were having a very tough time in Europe, and their domains were becoming, they were shrinking. And many Muslims felt that they need to rise against the British, because British and the French and the Russians were taking chunks of our Ottoman Empire away. Iqbal never thought that that Muslims should devote themselves to the cause of Khilafah, restoring the Khilafah. Perhaps it was intuitive, perhaps it was very well thought out, but he was never part of the Khilafat struggle. In fact, there was a time when he was very physically ill, and it is said that he was semi-conscious, and he became very ill. He had the problem of gout, there was a disease of the throat, and that affected him throughout his life. But there was a time when he was very ill, and he was he would fall in and out of consciousness, and at a certain time, he saw an old man that came and sat beside him, and he would ask questions to that old man, and that old man would answer. This bearded old man came and sit. And what happened was, when the question and answer is finished, the old man got up and he left through the door. And Iqbal shouted from the room to his servant Ali Bakhsh, and he said, Ali Bakhsh, stop the old man. And Ali Bakhsh, the servant, was sleeping in the living room, just outside Iqbal's bedroom. And he said, which old man? What old man? But still, nevertheless, he ran down the stairs and he came to the main door and found it locked from inside. He opened the lock and he looked out and he saw darkness. There was nobody there. It turned out that old man, what Iqbal interpreted was Khidr alayhi salam. Later, it was Khidr alayhi salam, and this was certain questions that he was asking that Khidr would answer, would respond. This is why his poem, Khizar-e-Ra, if you look at the poetry, it is not first grade. In fact, one colleague said to Iqbal, he says, this poetry is not as good. And Iqbal said, I cannot change it, because this is what came to me from the other Riyadh. So finally, Khilafat movement dissolved into a failure. Nothing much happened to it. But one thing that he did was, he became closer with his father in these years. He took on his father as some sort of a spiritual disciple. So for example, one letter, January 20th, 1920, he wrote to his father and he said, and again he's going through the spiritual experiences, and he said that I received a letter a few months ago saying that letter was from an anonymous person. And it said that, oh Iqbal, you don't even know what maqam you have in the sight of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you wish to know, recite this wazifa or the spiritual formula, and you will know what maqam, what status you have in the eyes of the Prophet. What did Iqbal do? He crumpled up the letter and threw it away. Right? He didn't think it was anything important. Perhaps it was even a joke. But what happened once was that at his house, a very notable scion of a mystical family, came and he met Iqbal. And as soon as he met Iqbal at his house, that young man started crying. He would look at Iqbal and he would cry. He would look at him and cry. And Iqbal became a bit puzzled and he asked him, do you need any money? Can I help you with any money? And he said, no, I'm not here for money. I'm here because my vision became fulfilled. And Iqbal said to him, what was your vision? He said, my vision was, I fell asleep and I saw Rasulullah SAW. And it was time for prayer. And everybody stood up for prayer. And Rasulullah looked around and he said, where is Iqbal? Where is Iqbal? And he sent an old man to get Iqbal, this person named Iqbal. And when that person came, I saw a British-looking man with no beard. And I saw that he was made to stand right next to the Prophet, on the right side of the Prophet. And I was shocked. And I was saying, who is this man? And then when I came to see you, I realized it was you. You are not even a hairbreadth different from that Iqbal that Rasulullah talked about. And when Iqbal wrote a letter to, of course, this impressed upon him. And he wrote to his father and he said, but I don't even consider myself a great Muslim. How can Rasulullah have wished me to pray beside him? So he asked his father in the letter and he said, can you please tell me how to recover that wazifa, where I can see what my maqam is in the eyes of the Prophet. In reality, his love for the Prophet was tremendous, immeasurable. It is not only witnessed in his poetry, but also in different incidents of his life. In 1910, he had another vision. Remember, Shair in Jahiliyyah, Shair does not mean a poet. Shair is a person who has shu'ur. A person who has some sort of sensitivity towards another reality. He was Shair in that sense. Many shu'ara, they die, and when their eyes close, they end up opening our eyes. He was that type of a Shair. He was a visionary for his nation. He was the eyes of that nation. In 1910, he had another vision in which there was an old man with a very long flowing white beard and a white robe, and he said to Iqbal, prepare 500 men. Now he had just come from his law office out to his room, and he saw this man there who said to him, prepare 500 men, and he disappeared. And he did not understand that. He knew it was a vision, but he didn't understand, what does 500 men mean? It later came to realize that it was his work, Israr-e-Khudi, which has 500 stanzas. So his father told him that you need to prepare 500 verses. 500 men means that your 500 verses are those men that are going out and defending the deen. So in 1923, the British realized his merit and they awarded him with the title of Sir, knighthood. First time he refused it, did not want to be given that title. The second time they insisted. And he thought about it and he made a condition. And his condition was that my teacher, Sayyid Mir Hassan, remember that teacher from his school days? He says that teacher will be given the title Shamsul Ulama, number one. And number two, no one will share that title with him. And it is said when he was being knighted by the governor on behalf of the Queen, and they asked him, who is this Sayyid Mir Hassan? Which work did he pen? And Iqbal said to the governor, he said, I am his work. This is the honor that he gave to his teacher. Did the criticism end? Did they buy off Iqbal by giving him knighthood? No. If you look at his poetry, you will see he became far more critical of the British government after he was awarded knighthood. Even though many people in the Muslim and Hindu circles called him a British agent for accepting knighthood. But you see in his poetry, his criticism increased. And this knighthood was a boon. And it was in fact a source of benefit for the Muslims. How? In 1924, he stayed out of politics. He did run for Punjab the Legislative Assembly on the condition that the other candidate will not be a Muslim. Because he did not want to contest another Muslim. SubhanAllah, how different is the situation with us too these days. Where we are actually, our Muslim candidates are willing to go out and discredit another Muslim candidate. Lack of sincerity is what we observe at times. So what happened is the other Muslim candidate, he stepped down. His name was Abdul Aziz. He was a lawyer. He stepped down. But the point is that there were a lot of anti-Muslim sentiments amongst the Hindus. In 1927, he wrote Zabur-e-Ajam. The knighthood helped him in many ways to exact concessions from the British. For example, I don't know if you've heard the case of Ghazi Alamdin Shaheed. If anybody's from Lahore, they probably know it. Okay? Probably know it. Yeah. So when on my trip to Lahore, I actually went there. Yes, of course you know. Yes. Basically, what happened was that there were a lot of anti-Muslim feelings, just like there are today. Islamophobia, and basically Islam was portrayed as religion of the barbaric people, religion of the uncouth, uncivilized. And this man, Rajpal, he wrote a book against Prophet ﷺ, in which he vilified the character of the Prophet, said a lot of shameful things. So this guy Alamdin, he was actually a university student, and he went and he killed Rajpal, right, in a fit of anger. And they say that after he killed him, he was washing the knife under the tap, outside in the neighborhood. And even and one account says that even Iqbal and many even Qaid-e-Azam told him that if you plead insanity, the British might let you go. And when he came onto the stand, he said, "No, I did it in all my full consciousness. If I have another chance, I'll do it again." And he was hanged. So it was a very tense moment for Muslims and Hindus, right? And his body wouldn't be given to his kin, his relatives. So Iqbal actually made sure that his body was returned on a guarantee that this would not create a social strife. So the British regarded him, and he became a spokesperson for the Muslims at many occasions. 1930 to 33 were, as you know, were bleak years for Muslim League. Muslims themselves were very divided, politically, socially, economically, but he worked for the empowerment of the Muslims. He made some intellectual efforts. He also made a South India trip. He went to Bangalore, he went to Madras, he went to Mysore. They loved him there. They celebrated his coming. They said that once he was on his way, I think it was in Bangalore that he was going, and his car was stopped by a group of people. And he said, "Why?" He said, "We have tea, and we have tea for you. You are Iqbal, and we want to give you our tea because we are from a village, from a very far off village. We have to travel all the way because we knew this was your route, and we've been waiting since the morning." So wherever he went, he was thrown medals at, and he was waited in stations, and he was glorified and celebrated. Unfortunately, in Punjab, he had many enemies, not only amongst the religious class but also amongst the literary class, and amongst the Sufis, the people of mystical bent, and amongst people who were even secular educated. They did not regard him that highly. He was eventually recognized. In 1931, he made a trip to Iran, Egypt, Italy, and Palestine. In Italy, he met Mussolini. In Palestine, he met there was an Islamic conference that was held there, and they wanted to establish a university for Muslims. And Iqbal was of the opinion that university should not be purely religious. It should also teach modern, subjects as well. And this is why he differed in that gathering. In 1932, he made a trip to Europe, a round table conference. He made a trip to Paris. He went to London. He went to Madrid. He went to Spain, right? And that trip also made a very big impression on him, because in Spain was ruled by Muslims since 711 to 1492. Our professor used to say 711, the year of the convenience store, right? So this is when Muslims entered Spain, and they entered as what? They entered as conquerors, right? So Iqbal heroized Tariq bin Ziyad. Tariq chu bar kanara yandul safine sukht guftan kar to ba nagah khit khatast durim az sawad watan baz chu rasim tark sabab zaruri shariat kuja rawast. They said, Tariq, they said to Tariq, "Why do you burn your ships? When does it say to renounce the means in Sharia? We're so far away from our land." And then what did Tariq bin Ziyad say? Khandid o shamshir u burd o guft Har mulk mulke maas ke mulke khuda maas. In his mind was not economic gain. It was that the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be implemented on the land. And of course Iqbal glorified. His martyr moment was not only Tariq bin Ziyad, it was Khalid ibn Walid, it was Tipu Sultan, it was Ghaznavi. So martyr moment is very, it's a personality you see again and again in history. In 1938 he was overcome with illness and loneliness. His political career ended in 1934. He was beset by sickness, and he was also disillusioned by Muslims. His goal was to unite Muslims on one political, social, intellectual platform. He couldn't do it. Muslims were more than over 20 organizations. They had, different ideological leanings. So this disillusioned him. Plus the fact that his wife had passed away. His very good friend, Sir Ras Mahmood, the grandson of Sir Allama Khan, he passed away. So he became lonely. In 1938, he was at his loneliest times. He nevertheless made preparation for Hajj. He said, I'm going to do Hajj in 1938. Unfortunately, he was never able to do that. On the day of his death, he had two children, Javed Iqbal and Munira at the time. 7-year-old Munira was very attached to her father. She would meet him 3 times a day. Before going to school, after coming back from school, and before going to sleep. She had to go to her father. But one night, she was attached to the father, wouldn't let him go. So the German maid, Doris, said, what is wrong with her tonight? And Iqbal said, and this is his words, maybe her intuition is telling her that this is the last time she'll be with her father. And it said that night he was very jovial. In fact, the pain from his illnesses did not bother him. But alas, Fajr, in the morning, he held his heart and he let out a cry. He held his heart like that. And Ali Bakhsh, the faithful servant who was ever so long with him, ran to him, to his bedside, to hold him. And the last word that came out of his mouth was Allah. And his face turned to one side towards the Qibla, and he died. Now this was the morning of 21st April 1938. He was buried at 8 p.m. on that very day. Over 70,000 people took part in his funeral. That's a big amount, considering those days we didn't have those means. Showed you the regard that they had for this man. Now the entire life, he worked for one cause. To work for Muslims' political power and to work for Muslims' spiritual power. Spiritual uplift, political uplift. And it is so strange, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, if you look at his mausoleum, it lies right between Lahore Fort and Badshai Mosque. Lahore Fort, a symbol of Muslim political power. Badshai Mosque, a symbol of Muslim spiritual power. This pretty much brings us to the end of Iqbal the person and his life. But I want to share with you, before we end, some memorable aspects of Iqbal's life. And there are 3 points that really struck out. I have a biography with him, a beautiful biography written by his son, Zinda Rood, the ever-living stream. 720 pages, but a wonderful read. If you'd like to know more about this man and his wonderful life. One thing that you think about Iqbal that really stands out is his zuhud, self-contentment. Never money hungry. People called him an agent of the British, but he was literally the poorest knight of the British Empire. His entire life was beset with financial constraints. Huge family to support. He of course married three women, 3 ladies, one after another. He had 2 nieces to support. He had parents to support in his old age. Now he could have made a lot of money. He could have been a high court judge. He could have had a lot of land from the British. Had he sold out. Never sold out on his principles. He rejected professorship. At the colleges. Maharaja Kishan Prasad was Maharaja in a very high administrative post at Hyderabad. He once awarded him he once offered him the post of the law minister. He didn't take it. Once his own servant, Ali Bakhsh, the faithful Ali Bakhsh, asked him, why don't you take government job? And he said, Ali Bakhsh, I want to say a lot of things. And if I take a government job, I won't be free to say the things I want to say. तायर लाहूती उस रिस्क से मौत अच्छी जिस रिस्क से आती हो परवाज में होता है. He was a living example of that. Once there was a very high profile case, Motilal Nehru, the father of Jawaharlal Nehru, a very respected lawyer. Once they needed a high profile case, they needed translation of Persian and Arabic documents. And they said, Iqbal, we need you to come to Bihar. He came to Bihar, he said, we'll take care of your transportation, we'll take care of all your supplies and books, we'll take care of your accommodation, don't worry about it. We'll give you 1,000 rupees a day. And you can stay. This is a public case, this is a case involving the government. You can extend it to 2 months. Now Iqbal's income was a meager 500 rupees a month. So imagine 1,000 rupees a day. He finished it right, the work that he needed to do in that very night, and he took the next train back to Lahore. In fact, they had to scramble to get money for him because the banks were closed on that day. He didn't care about the money at all. In fact, Maulana Maududi gives him a beautiful tribute, and he said that on that night, when he was accommodated in a very lush, bedroom, he could not lie on that bed. And he kept saying to himself that I, Iqbal, a servant of Muhammad bin Abdullah, والسلام, who used to sleep on date palm leaves, how can I dare sleep on a room like this, on a bed like this? So he went sat on his chair, and he would cry there. Ultimately, he called the servant and he said, "Let there be my charpai, the reed bed in the bathroom." And he spent the night in the bathroom, and then he left that place. So this zuhud, this self-contentment. I'll take only what I need. But spiritual elevation, spiritual hunger, spiritual quest was a signature of his life. Loyalty towards Islam and Muslims. They say that in 1934, that was close to his death, when Aligarh University, the dream of Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, that would play a pivotal role, when Aligarh University set up an anti-God society, a society to prove God in Islam. Iqbal did not sleep the whole night. At Fajr, he would cry. He was heard crying because he felt the pain of Aligarh. Madrasa ye surur, madrasa ye jawan ye surur ranai, inhi ke dam se hai main khana Farangabad. He felt the pain that how this young youth is being dissuaded from his original objective. He would often visit the sites of the great saints. Why? Because you will feel a spiritual presence there. So you see Iqbal going to the grave site of Tipu Sultan or Sheikh Ahmad Hindi. Even at Qurtuba, he felt the presence of the souls there, of the Muslims that once inhabited it. Javed Iqbal himself says that he heard his father twice talking to Rumi, but of course he could not see Rumi. Iqbal saw Rumi, and he held a discussion with him. He was kind. He was not a bigoted person. In a jokingly manner, he said, "Iqbal, हम तेरी शायरी सुनकर जेलें जाते हैं, तो तुम यहाँ घर में बैठ के हुक्का गुड़गुड़ाते रहते हो." Right? You smoke hookah and at home, and we hear your poetry, and we go to jail, for the cause of Islam. And Iqbal said to him, and he said, he's a very quick-witted person, and he said, what does a qawwal do? A spiritual singer. He makes the audience dance. He makes the audience become unconscious. He makes the audience, get out of their state. Right? If the qawwal himself take on these states, there would be no more qawwali. So he was a quick-witted person. Once as a child he came late to school. He was not very punctual. So the teacher got upset and he said, "Iqbal, you're late." And the young Iqbal said, "Iqbal is always late. Iqbal means fame." So this is yes.
What he saw at the end when he said, "Gayo den jab main tarha is anjuman mein, ab yahan mere raza aur bhi."
That's right. Well, I feel that you know, when we talked about that period right after his Europe trip, he felt that he was very isolated, especially when Khilafat movement was at its peak. He felt completely neglected, and this is the time when his meeting with Khidr occurred. But gradually people realize and they tend to appreciate. It takes time to even appreciate, a great man amidst us. And it took time, and later realized. I mean, as just the funeral attendance testifies, people realized that this man is in fact not selling them out. He's loyal to them. He's taking their interest to heart. We see, for example, during his Afghanistan trip, I mean, who was with him? Sir Mahmood, Salman Nadwi, and Iqbal. And these three men, one's an educationist, one is a scholar of religion, and one is an intellectual. And these three had a very close company. So he found people that he struck chord with in his later life. But this was not always the case. He always called himself in his poetry, in his days, that he's a lonely nightingale singing in a deserted orchard. There's no one there to hear his cry. But this changed later on. And of course he's very optimistic. करेंगे अहले निगाह नई बस्तियां आबाद, मेरी नजर नहीं सोए कूफा और बगदाद. People will emerge, and new visionaries will come out, and new lands will be, new ideas will be brought forth, progress will be made. So in short, this is what I believe, that उनके हमनवा पैदा हो गए थे बाद में. Yes. Yeah, this was a bit of a controversy. Whether he should be buried there or not. Certain political leaders, I won't name him, but he did not wish him to be buried there. He should be buried elsewhere. But it was the insistence of certain people who knew Iqbal very well. And like I said, perhaps it's a quirk of luck. We don't know what it is, that where he's buried fits in with his ideological mission. Yeah, so no, it was somewhat of a disagreement in the beginning, but of course, I mean, at the end of the day, he was buried where he was buried. In fact, it was the Afghan kingdom that built his mausoleum. If you look at the mausoleum, it's built in Italian style. It's not an Islamic style at all. The whole architecture, the limestone, the stone was brought from Kabul as well. The architecture was brought from Italy. Yes.
This concept of truly was in the spiritual level or the physical level?
Yeah, I really want to tackle this ideas of Iqbal in our next gathering, inshallah. But just to be fair to this question, Khudi is a concept. It's a very spiritual and mystical concept. Okay, in a nutshell, basically what it means is elevate yourself to that level where you manifest divine attributes within yourself. हर लहजा है मोमिन, नई याद नई शान, किरदार में गुफ्तार में अल्लाह की बुरहान. Right? So when people look at you, they see divine attributes emanating from you. So his whole poetry about training nazar, nigah, training the self. A good parallel from the Quran is, for example, when Yusuf alayhi salam, when the women of Egypt had a plan for him, plot for him, right? And when Zulaykha called him out, just looking at Yusuf was enchanting, that they did not even realize they were cutting their hands. Iqbal wants a moment to be of that level, where he becomes a spiritual elevator to that level. So yes, it is spiritual and physical, but its end is not spiritual and physical, it is very worldly. Right? So if you have spiritual power, elevation, this world will be given to you. Allah will give you this world at your feet. But how to develop that, this was his mission. So I guess we're at the end. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefit us from the talk that we have today.
I was very much impressed from Khushal Khan Khattak.
Khushal Khan, are you referring to Buddha Baloch ki Nasiyat?
Some of his poetry is
Yes.
translation of Khushal Khan.
That's right, that's right. This whole idea of, marawat, ghairat, manliness. I mean, these are praiseworthy attributes that even the Arabs had at the time of the Prophet. Somehow Muslims lost these attributes. This is why you see that the Sayyid Ahmad Brelvi Shaheed movement, I mean, Ali radiallahu anh came to him in a dream and said, you must learn Pashto and go to that part of India. Because there you will find people who are as tough as rock. And the superpowers have discovered that in our world today. So the point is, yes, Iqbal wanted to revive that idea of khudi. फितरत की मकासिद की करता है निगहबानी या बंदा है सहराई या मर्दे कोहिस्तानी. Child of nature, the man of nature, he's the one he will. So yes, I mean that's true. He idolized Khushal Khan Khattak. He idolized the person who has Veera, basically Veera.